Thursday, August 8th, 2019, and this is the Pro and the Con Show. My name is Michael James Ott. Welcome to the show. As always, about 15 minutes, starting a little bit early today because I got an event that my wife has asked me to go to, so got to leave here a couple minutes early. So again, just very briefly, the show encouraging people to be better citizens, get more involved, get less ignorant. Okay, and the way you do that is you look at the information that you get and make sure you're trying to get it from multiple sources and try to get the full impact, the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against. That's the truth. Okay. And regardless of everything, whatever the issue is, there are always pros and cons, goods and bad, and for and against, always. And so a lot of times I go through 5 different websites. They have different information streams on them. And so tonight I was doing that. And one of the websites, Breitbart, caught my attention because they had this headline rather prominent at the center of their webpage. And it says, farmer confidence, support for Trump soars. Okay, so let's look. So one of the nice things about these websites is you can just search. So I went and I searched by the word farmers on the 5 different websites. And the reason why this struck me in particular is because depending on what information stream I was seeing, I would see stories like this farmer in Iowa, used to be a Trump supporter and now is not because, whatever. His shipments of crop were impacted by, the tariffs or whatever. So this is kind of a theme that I saw on several and I don't call them news channels, I call them information streams because they very rarely stick to just the who, the what, the where, and the when. They often seed in a whole lot of, actually probably 90% of what they broadcast, if you will, is some kind of conjecture, some kind of opinion, and not just the facts. So let's look, and again, encouraging you. See, yes, I'm actually pointing a finger, even though it's not politically correct. You, pointing the finger at you and saying, be a better citizen and don't just accept what these different websites are saying. So let's start with Breitbart because they had this article. And so you actually, click on this and you go to the article. And so the headline of the article itself says, American farmers' support for Trump rises despite China's tactics. So remember, the main page article used the word soars, as in rises, takes flight. The main article says rises, okay, and there's a different connotation between rises and soars. Again, just trying to make sure I'm pointing out where some of the bias can be put into these stories. So then I'll just read a few bits from this article, and then we'll go to the other websites and see what they're saying about farmers. So, China's attempt to punish American farmers for U.S. trade policies has not shaken support for President Donald Trump. So farmer confidence in the agricultural economy soared in July. Now, farmer confidence in the economy soared in July, not the support for President Trump. The support for President Trump remains unshaken and actually rose a little bit, a few percentage points, but did not soar. The confidence in the agricultural economy soared, and I think, I live in a rural area, and my family lives in the rural areas, and we know lots of farmers, and There was a lot of trouble getting the crops into the fields this spring. There was a lot of rain. It was really hard to get the crops in, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Back in April, May, even parts of June, that this was going to be potentially a bad year for crops because it was so hard for some of the farmers to get their crops into the fields. But in many locations, and including the little town I grew up in northern Illinois, despite the fact that the crops were late getting into the fields, the crops are growing gangbusters, and the farmers generally are quite happy if they actually got the crops planted. What's out there is growing like crazy. So it started out like hit and miss whether you get the seeds into the ground, but once they got there, wow, they've just taken off. I know that the last time I was home, it was around the 4th of July, and they say knee high by the 4th of July, but this field right across the highway from where my mother lives, oh gosh, I mean, the stalks were 7-8 feet tall, and they had not been in the fields that long. It was I would have said almost they couldn't grow that fast. I mean, corn grows fast, don't misunderstand me, but wow. I mean, and so anyway, so why is the agriculture economy confidence? Well, the crops, once they were planted, they're growing a lot better than I think the farmers had an expectation of a couple months ago. Now, and then, so the facts, right? So President Donald Trump is gaining popularity. So there was a Farm Journal Pulse survey, and it showed that 79% of farmers now approve of the job compared to 74% in June, and 53% said they strongly approve of President Trump, up from 50% in June. So a couple months later, and his approval ratings amongst farmers is up. Okay, so now we go to Fox, and I'm just looking here at the articles. So it says, rain tariffs delay farmers across the Midwest. Widespread flooding is creating chaos for farmers' planting season. So this fellow was reporting from Dwight, Illinois, which is, again, very close to where my family lives, where I'm from. And that was back in June. So, and then there's another article that says, Eric Shawn, the farmers are hurting. Predictions for the trade war with China. So that was back in May. So back in May, there was a lot of worry and concern about the trade wars with China. Since then, the president has gotten the government to come out with a bunch of support, financial support for farmers to make up for. In fact, there's other headlines that I'm about to read you where it says that they're being overpaid, considerably overpaid, which of course would make the farmers quite happy if it's true. So from July, Mississippi farmers suffering after widespread flooding ruined the planting season. So there's a lot of areas apparently. It says 250,000 acres sits under slow receding floodwater in the Mississippi Delta. Okay, so that's Fox News. At NPR, so one headline says, Wyoming and Nebraska farmers are concerned after a critical irrigation tunnel collapses. Here's an article from July 25th, says economists say Trump administration is overpaying farmers for the trade losses. Just very quickly here, according to the new study, Chinese tariffs caused the price of soybeans grown in the U.S. to drop by 78 cents per bushel. And last year's aid package, however, paid farmers more than twice that much, $1.65 per bushel, for the beans that each farmer produced. Okay. Another article has climate changes taxpayers will shoulder larger payouts to farmers. So $8 billion a year subsidizing crop insurance for farmers. That number could be a lot bigger this year. Officials with the U.S. Department of Agriculture are expecting up to $1 billion in prevented planting payments to farmers in various trouble. Okay, so that was NPR. Now CNN. So one article says, it's from August 8th, scientists say farmers might be able to grow their way out of the climate crisis. So here's the beginning of the article. It is a brutal time to be an American farmer. Hammered by trade wars, a climate crisis, and the worst income-to-debt ratio in a generation, calls to farm-aid crisis lines have doubled in some states, and the website for Iowa corn growers now includes a page on suicide prevention. Also from today, the planet is being consumed by humans. This is, I've said in the past, there's almost 7.8 billion people on the planet now. That's probably 2 to 3 times more than what this planet can approximately, or not approximately, comfortably is the right word, comfortably support. So we've got, if you don't like contraception, then you don't want the planet to live. We've got to prevent people from having children at anywhere near the rate that they've been having them. We've got to turn the population growth opposite direction and decide how many billions of people should be on this planet, and then work together to get there in a way that makes the most sense, going forward. But right now, we're off the cliff. We're like a virus going crazy on the planet, and one of the main things is production of meat. So raising cattle and so on is a huge burden on the environment, and we just can't survive it. So. And then from yesterday, it says Elizabeth Warren unveils extensive rural policy plan ahead of a 4-day visit to Iowa. August 6th, Trump's new tariffs will cause more pain for Americans. Says that on August 6th, that move spurred China. Oh, by the way, all the Breitbart survey results were from July, before all the latest tariffs and China's response, which China has just halted all purchases of U.S. farm products. So we'll see what happens here in a bit, in a couple months, whether the farmer sentiment toward Mr. Trump improves still or gets worse. All right, and lastly, on Huffington Post, so largest farms grab lion's share of Trump trade war aid, reports finds. So billions of taxpayer dollars in farm subsidies aimed at mitigating the damage of President Trump's. So again, this is a leftward leaning. Let's read this article a little bit more. President Trump's trade war with China have overwhelmingly flowed to the largest and most successful farmers, rather than aiding struggling operations, according to a new report. More than half of the farm bailouts went to just 1/10 of the recipients in the program. The top 1% of farmers were paid an average of $183,000, while the bottom 80% averaged less than $5,000. Now, there's a the size of the farm makes a big difference there. So anyway, and this is the whole thing, when you read these things, it's like, okay, yeah, but I mean, obviously, if you had a huge farm or a huge conglomerate of farms, then yes, you would get paid more of these, support monies, because, instead of having 200 acres planted, you had, 200,000. Well, yeah, it's a big difference. Anyway, so it's interesting to me that, and I hope that just by doing what I've done here, that it encourages you to take a few extra minutes and try to ferret out what's really going on here. And the reality is that some of the farmers are doing fairly well. There's another segment of the farmers that aren't. Mr. Trump is highly subsidizing. His government is highly subsidizing the farmers, apparently more than adequately taking care of them in this trade war kind of thing. And we'll see what happens now that China has completely cut off receiving of shipments of U.S. agricultural goods. We'll see what comes of that in September, October timeframe. But until then, only time will tell. But it appears to me like everyone is trying to, claim the farmers on their side. And the reality is there are some farmers on one side and there's some farmers on the other side. But mostly, I would guess, based on what I've read, that mostly currently farmers support Mr. Trump. And we'll just have to see what happens, and if this continuing trade war kind of thing eventually impacts them to a place where they no longer support him as much. All right, for the Pro and Con Show, this is Michael James Ott. Another show in the can. I will talk to you again soon. And until then, bye for now.